Hello. This video continues our conversation on individuality and community. And in the video on John Stuart Mill, we focus a lot on what's significant about individuals, that uniqueness in all of us, and how that's essential to how society progresses and develops. For this video, we're going to use a different perspective. And this one comes from Confucius, who is often called in Latin languages as Confucius. And so that is the term I'm going to take because that's the most common way it's understood in the United States. And he is one of the most influential people of all time. He has influenced the lives of billions of people, right? Particularly most influential in China, and as I said in the other video, and Southeast Asia and East Asia. So his perspective is very different than Mill's. And part of it has to do with the time that he grew up. And so he was born in the middle of 500 BCE, and he grew up right around the time of what was called the Warring States period, which was an era of intense civil war when the Zhou dynasty fell apart and different regions began to fight. Different kingdoms emerged and they were all fighting each other. It was an era of immense conflict, but also the most intellectually fruitful period of Chinese history, one of the most intellectually fruitful periods. Taoism, which we'll talk about later in the semester, also comes from this time. And so Confucius develops himself during that time. He was born a noble, but grew up in relative poverty because his father died when he was young, and he had to live his life taking care of his mom. And and eventually he got the opportunity to study, and he developed his ideas. And he also, over time, developed followers and disciples. So Confucius has a very strong love of tradition and social harmony and community and family. These are the core foundations of what human excellence looks like, where humans develop their potential, right? And this is in contrast to some other philosophies, like, for example, the legalist. The legalist philosophers were people who said human beings, kind of like Hobbes, human beings are reactionary, impulsive, and they need to be controlled, right? The legalists argue that you need strong laws and proper punishments. You have the strong law, the proper punishment. And if you do those well, you can control people and have a balanced, healthy society. Essentially, you need to manipulate people by reward and punishment, right? Very similar to some of the behaviorist trends in psychology, for those of you who might have learned about that, right? When we talk about Pavlov's dog, right? We ring the bell and eventually he salivates because he's so used to getting food, right? That's the legalists had a similar idea about human nature, where these kind of beings that are reactive and instinctual, and our instinctual drives often overpower our rational thinking. We need to be manipulated properly. And so the legalists would say, hey, you need to make sure you pass laws about the right things, because if you pass laws about things there shouldn't be laws about, then it just makes people confused. If you pass laws that are too dense or complex, then people won't want to follow them and people won't feel bad if they don't follow them. So you need to make the right laws about the right things, but you also need the right punishments, right? If someone's stealing and you kill their family as a consequence, well, then that's just going to lead to rebellion, right? You need to find out what's the proper punishment. But if someone steals and they just have to pay, the equivalent to 10 cents, then people are just going to keep stealing, right? So what's the right punishment for that? Maybe you do need to chop off someone's hand. That might be the appropriate punishment to make people afraid of doing bad things. That's kind of the legalist thing. You have to make people afraid of the right level of fear. And Confucius is like, no, that's not what's ideal. That inevitably leads to rebellion. What you need is to make people genuinely inspired to do the right thing. And that starts from the top, right? If the good people are uplifted, If goodness is celebrated, then the people will be good. If honor and virtue are elevated, then honor and virtue is what people will aspire to. So the ideal person for Confucian thought is the Jinzi. And that's translated as basically a nobleman, a gentleman, someone who is worthy of reverence, someone who's worthy of respect, right? We've all met someone like that, right? Someone who has exceptional grace, someone who really embodies the virtues of society. And that person has a certain type of influence, right? Someone who has a lot of charm and elegance and they're learned and all these things. That person has genuine influence over people. Like, wow, I want to be like that person, or I want my children to be like that person, right? Now, what those values are might differ from different time periods and things like that, but anyone who really embodies that. But there's a certain level of like humaneness and poise and intelligence and compassion that inspires others to follow. And so he says the ideal is to become that, right? Well, how do you develop that? Right? How do you become a Jinzi? Well, you do that by cultivating Ren. Ren is translated as humaneness or benevolence, right? And so what does humaneness mean? Well, it's humane when we say the word like that's inhumane treatment, right? Or with animals, humane society. Isn't that a funny thing? Why do we call the place where animals are kept humane societies or humane shelters? What does animals have to do with being humane or being a human? Well, part of why we use that term humane is because we understand that part of being human means treating animals and other living things with a certain level of care, right? That it's inhumane to just take a bunch of dogs and cats and just abuse them, even if no one wants them, right? Or to just take them all and just use them for experiments or cruelly have them fight each other for profit, right? There's a certain level of care and development that goes into being a human that you give to others, even non-humans. So this idea of this connection between being a human and caring for others, right? That our humanity is shown in caring for others and caring for other living things. That's going to be essential for Confucius thought. And so you can already see a contrast between him and Mill, right? For Mill, humanity is in your own thoughts. It's in acting on your passions. It's on being intelligent and capable and putting out what's inside of you to others. Whereas Confucius, your humanity is best shown in how you care and take care of other people around you. That's what really makes you a human in a certain sense. It makes you most human, right? So Ren is what you're meant to cultivate. And Ren gives you a real influence. It's like a genuine charisma. When someone is really ethical, someone is really a good moral person, they start to exude a certain kind of charisma that makes other people want to follow them, right? They have an influence over other people, right? Even if they're not necessarily a good person, when someone really lives up to a certain standards, like all of you live in different cultural bubbles. And I know it doesn't mean you're a national culture, but even subcultures of different communities you're a part of, right? Whether it's sports or gaming, or there might be certain aesthetic communities like you might find on TikTok or other things like that, right? Musical communities like hip hop, things like that, right? And within all those communities, there's certain standards or norms or virtues. And those who embody them have a lot of influence over people, right? Many of your celebrities that you like a lot, musicians you like a lot, they influence you because of the values that they embody. And they're ones that you aspire to or you feel you should. And that person influences you. If they're doing something, you feel that you might change your mind on it, right? Maybe it's not enough that you're just like, oh, wow, this person did it, now I'm doing it. But certain people, especially if you're younger or even now, if certain people make certain decisions, you might feel, well, if this person embodies the excellence of what I value, maybe it's okay to do these things, right? A great example might be with Beyonce and country music, right? For me growing up, country music is far away from anything people I knew would really want to listen to. If someone was, blasting country music. People are like, what? This dude is crazy. This person's lady's crazy. Like, why do they listen to this music? It's horrible, right? But a lot of people respect Beyonce a lot because Beyonce has lived up to certain standards and values and norms, and therefore she has immense influence because a lot of the lifestyle that people want, she embodies it. Right? A lot of things that people wish they had, she embodies it. And so when she decides to do a country album, a lot more people start saying, "Oh, maybe it's not so bad, right? Maybe I'm gonna listen to it." Because she's influenced them, right? People are like, "Oh, this is good." Right? And of course, country's roots are in blues, in black music, right? So it's not like it's so far away, but it's something that has been one group of people's music for much longer. But when Beyonce does it, people are like, yeah, I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to at least give it a try. And now maybe country's going to be even more popular, right? But it's because of her influence, right? So that's an example of Ren. It's humaneness, it's benevolence, it's this kind of energy you develop when you really committed to doing the right thing and caring for others, right? It's like we talk about being humane, or like I said, the opposite is treating someone inhumanely, right? There's something about a proper treatment or care that people deserve, a certain type of cruelty people shouldn't experience in a human society. That's what Ren is getting at, right? Now, how do you cultivate this Ren, right? You want to be a Jinza, you need to cultivate Ren. How do you do that? Well, this is where things get really, the communitarian aspect comes out strongest for Confucius. And the first thing is Li. So Li is ritual customs, essentially. Now, to help clarify this, we're going to talk about what's the difference between a norm and a custom, right? And a ritual. So a norm, and some of you who've taken sociology might have already covered this, but a norm is essentially what's normal in a society, right? It's just what people tend to do. It's just what's normal. There's nothing particularly special about it. But for instance, in Spokane, it's a norm to drive because of how our society is organized. People drive all over the place. In Paris, it's not the norm to drive, right? There is lots of cars, but there's so much space for walking and biking and trains that way more people bike, walk, and take trains to do a lot of things they want to do than drive. Right? Don't get me wrong, there's tons of cars, but it's not the norm in the same way it is in a place like Spokane, right? You're gonna find way more people on a given day are walking where they need to go, biking where they need to go, or taking public transportation where they need to go than driving. Compared to a place like Spokane, we're gonna find way more people driving. But normal, it's just a norm. It's just what happens to be the case. If things changed, then the norm would change. That's different than a custom, right? A custom is something that tends to have more of a weight, more of a cultural significance than just a norm, right? People have to learn customs. It's not just what happens to be the case, which might change. Customs are things that people have been doing for a long time, right? Like for instance, when someone sneezes, we might say, bless you. That's not just a norm, it's a custom. In fact, you'll be taught, hey, if someone sneezes, the parents say, bless you. Or if the kid doesn't say, oh, they won't. They'll say, hey, say bless you, right? Or certain ways of politeness, saying, oh, excuse me, right? Instead of saying, hey, say, excuse me, can you tell me where this tower is? That's a custom, right? Because it's beyond just what happens to be a social case. Of the case, it's something that people are trained to do, the customs, right? And then there are rituals. Rituals are even more complex and rich. Rituals are a set of practices that are replicated, the same set of practices that create a special sense of time and space. Right? Now, there are other definitions of ritual, but that's just one we're going to use, right? So one thing is that rituals are repetitive. They tend to be done there seems to be similar parts of it that are done over time. And these things can evolve and change, of course, but there are certain key components that stay the same that allow it to create a certain time and space. And rituals, different anthropologists and socialists debate over what counts as a ritual and what doesn't. But there are a lot of rituals that we live with in our society that help us give a sense that we belong and that we're a part of something. And I'll give an example of some. Birthdays, right? United States, what do we do? Just because you're born, people bring out a cake and they light fire on it, and then you blow fire off the cake, and then everyone is happy for you. Why do we do that? What's the value of that? Like, what's the point of that? Like, why? There's so many things we could do, right? People could stage a play. They could do all kinds of stuff. Instead, we cook some food, particularly a cake, and put candles in it and burn them. And then we sing a song, Happy Birthday, the same song all the time. You never sing a different song, right? That helps it feel like that's a ritual moment, right? The happy birthday song. And you can't just sing it anytime. You can't be in the club like put on the happy birthday song, right? I want to sing happy birthday. It only matters if it's someone's birthday. This can happen in all kinds of places. But if you're just walking around the street singing happy birthday song to yourself, someone might be like, this person, if they're cool, they might be like, oh, this person's really happy about their birthday, right? But a lot of people are like, this person's weird, right? Especially if you sing it, maybe you sing it once, you're like, okay, this person is their birthday. But if you're walking around singing it every day, people might call the police on you just because you're singing the happy birthday song. That's how important it is to the ritual context. Its meaning is so tied to a specific context, right? But if you're singing any other song, if you're singing, The Sound of Music, or you're singing any kind of song that's popular, well, then people are like, I guess this person just really likes that song, right? So there's certain things that there's certain meanings that get tied to ritual context, right? Another great ritual time is Christmas, right? There's certain decorations and music and foods that we only eat during that time. You never sing those songs any other time. You don't eat those foods any other time, right? We rarely ever eat turkey outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we don't sing those songs except for during that time. We don't decorate our house with the mistletoe and all these other things, icicles. During the summer, you could, but people think you're really weird if you decorate trees with Christmas stuff during the time that it doesn't belong. Why? They're just objects, but they're more than that. They create a special sense of time and space. And during Christmas time, you feel it. You feel a different energy in the air, right? Because of that, the way everyone working together for the ritual, right? The final ritual example I'll give, and there's more I'm sure you can think of, is marriage, right? Why do you get all these people together and one person usually wears a dress and the other person doesn't, and they tell people, hey, we love each other, we're gonna be married. Is it like if they didn't do it, they wouldn't be able to stay together? Right? Like they needed to do this in order to maintain their relationship into the future. Like if you don't do this ceremony, your relationship will end right there. No. There's a way that the ceremony adds meaning and weight to the bond that people have, and it brings others into it. But it's not just the ceremony, it's also that you're participating in a ceremony that's similar to what other people have done for centuries, right? The wedding ceremony, it carries that you're belonging to, is showing not just that you're belonging to one another, but you're also belonging to society and its longevity. Where I'm belonging to this thing that's existed for thousands of years with you, right? When I get married. And that adds a meaning and weight to it, right? That's important. So for Confucius, it's these rituals and customs too, certain customs, but rituals are even more important. It's participating in these that really are the opportunity to show your excellence, right? It's you want to have the best, you want to give the best birthday gifts. You want to have the best wedding. And I don't mean best as in better than other people, but I mean best as in really trying to embody what that ritual is about, right? You want to give the best gift on Christmas to other people, not because you're like, oh, I'm better than the people, or I want people to know I'm great, but no, I really want to show my gratefulness to you during this time. I want to show how much I care about you, right, during this time with these gifts. I want to show the way that the love of life that the European people were expressing by decorating trees and having mistletoe. I want to really put that on very well, and lights and all that stuff. It's not just about self gratification. It's about really leaning into the meaning and potential of these rituals, which is where your own growth and development occurs. So you can kind of, so I'm hoping you can see a strong difference between Confucius and Mill, right? Where it's being able to really strongly participate in these traditions that your humanity is best developed and actualized, right? To be refining something that's been, what better purpose or value than to refine and exalt something that's been going on for hundreds or thousands of years, right? That's way more significant than just being able to express your own inner belief or thought or ideas, right? Now, of course, there is the question of which rituals, because there's lots of different cultures and lots of different perspectives. And this is where, for Confucius, his views can be controversial, that he's pretty specific, the Zhou people, right, who were the rulers before the Warring States period. He's like, part of the reason why we've fallen into the Warring States period is because we've rejected those way of life, those rituals, those customs and those things, right? We need to get back to those. And if we do those, any society that embraces these customs and norms will flourish, right? But lots of people have taken those customs from the influence of Confucianism, but also mix it with their own traditions and things as well. Because one of the things that helps it work out is the core thing is this benevolence, right? This humaneness, right? That's one of the main things that's important. So that's kind of one of the cores of it. So remember I said there's two things. The first is this whole importance of rituals, li, right? Now the other thing that's important is filial piety, respect for family, respect for elders. That is so crucial to Confucius. That there's something that's called a family feeling, which is the feeling of when you're with your family and everyone's doing what they're supposed to do, and you feel a certain sense of security or care and love, right? He says that a person needs that. In fact, he goes so far as to argue that a person, according to certain interpretations, because one thing about Confucian thought is that there's so many different interpretations from different scholars and things like that that have taken up different ideas and aspects. And he has other disciples who are famous who have added and changed his ideas. But one of the things he says that without that family connection, that sense of belonging to family, it's actually impossible for a person to really be moral. You need it. If you don't grow up with a sense of that you belong to a family, because for Confucius, the family is the core unit of society, not individuals, the family, right? So you belong in a family. And for Confucius, society itself should be understood as one giant family, a family composed of smaller families. So the core unit is the family. When families are healthy, when families are successful, society is successful. Society does well. Whereas with Mill, it's when we allow individuals to do the most that they can do. Society is healthy and successful. Even though there might be tension and conflict, that tension and conflict is productive and leads to the invention of new ideas, new ways of life, new ways of being. But Confucius says, no, there's a certain level of harmony that you need for a healthy society. And that comes when families are successful. And for families to be healthy, people need to set aside their own individual wills a lot of the time. And so he says it's very important to be obedient to your parents, but more important to venerate them, to honor them and respect them. Right? One of the in section 2, in book 2, he says a lot of people, they say is filial piety is just caring physically, basically, for your parents. They make sure they're fed and all that stuff. He says Horses and animals, dogs need that. That's not enough. It's really about honoring them, revering them, and your ancestors before them, to worship your ancestors, like your family, right? For a lot of, especially during that time in China, it's your family is not just your immediate living relatives, but also those who are dead. That's still very true now in a lot of places, right? You go and honor your ancestors. So your family continues. You want to honor what they are. Some cases, people, they literally understand it as connecting with the spirit. For some people, they understand it much more symbolically as connecting to the legacy of who they are. But you can understand that there's now your sense of self. To be a full human, you need to be connected to a much longer, broader pattern of people's lives. It's not just about what you want as an individual, right? And so for him, he says it's about obeying your parents, obeying the people who you're supposed to, and serving those who you're supposed to serve within your family context. But it's not about necessarily your own desires. And so for Confucius, the emperor or the leader is supposed to be like a good father, and in particular emphasis on father, right? This is not the kind of worldview for Confucius where there's this idea that there can be that women should be head of the household or these types of things, right? But for Confucius, if you're a good father, right? If you're truly a good father or a good parent, because nowadays some people are trying to take Confucian ideas and blend them with other perspectives, right? But if you're truly a good parent, why would your kid rebel? Why would your kid disobey you, right? If a teenager is being rebellious or a kid is being rebellious, it's probably because the parents aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Now, of course, this doesn't change from the fact that the kid's supposed to be obedient. But the idea is that if everyone does their role properly, everyone gets what they need, right? And so if the father does what he's supposed to do by providing and teaching and bringing honor to his family by doing the rituals that he's supposed to do, then he should be obeyed. And if he's obeyed, he's empowered to do what he's supposed to do. And then he's supposed to care. And it goes back and forth like this, right? But one of the issues that people talk about is like, what happens if the person's not doing what they're supposed to do, right? What happens if your father is not doing, or your mother is not doing what they're supposed to do by you? They're not fulfilling the role the right way. Or what happens if your son or your daughter or your child is not doing what they're supposed to do? Well, from the Confucian perspective, you're still supposed to do your role, even if they're not doing theirs, because there is an eye towards society, right? So if my spouse is not being a good spouse to me, I shouldn't just be a bad spouse to them. I should be a good spouse to them. Because then other people will see that I am doing the right thing. And then they'll still want to do the right thing. Also remember, I'm generating a certain type of energy, right? Or awareness or other things with other people by by cultivating the ren of me doing my role the right way. So it's a very strong idea for social cohesion and harmony. And so it's more about what's better for the greater good in a certain sense. Now and to be clear, there is room for individuality in Confucian thought. It's not that there's none. One of the things that is not talked about as much in what I had you read is the importance of education. A Jinzi is also supposed to be very educated. And because there is a room for self-cultivation through learning. You're supposed to grow through learning, right? But this learning, this individual growing self, is properly contextualized by your investment in the well-being of those around you and in carrying on the traditions and customs and norms that you've inherited, right? Confucius is one of the first Confucian schools of thought, one of the first to develop what we now would call standardized testing, right? The idea that you have to take a test to get into a certain position. Most of the time, it would just be nepotism, right? It was my brother, my cousin, my son, I'm going to put them in the job. Or those who are loyal to me, right? If I take over and I fight the other side and I win, all the people who fought with my generals and all those people, those are the people who take over the positions, right? But he says that leads to incompetence sometimes. Just because someone helped you fight and risk their life for you doesn't mean they know how to run a granary or run the books, the financial books of the empire. He says that kind of incompetence that actually is what leads to rebellion over time, right? You win, you put all your crew takes over, and then some of them don't do what they're supposed to do well, and people say, well, hey, I didn't get what my money didn't come in time, my wealth didn't come in time. Someone stole from me, and the police people still haven't looked at, they haven't even came to my house, and it's been 5 months, right? That level of incompetence breeds resentment and breeds aggression. Because instead, you should pick the people who actually are the best. Pick the people who are the smartest. Pick the people who have the most honor and integrity. Pick the people who are good to their family. Pick, these are people you should pick. But also, certain Confucian schools said, well, just also have a test. So people who are really the best for that position will get it, right? So this brings to a close the section on Confucian thought. There's so much more to talk about. There's so many different interpretations. It is very rich and vast tradition with lots of different perspectives, lots of different people who've been influential. Just to give you just a sense of a different worldview and a different emphasis placed on where human potential and excellence is best expressed. This video will be uploaded very soon, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.